I transported monies interstate between Los Angeles and Phoenix to arrange the hit on Biggie Small.
And why did you decide to come forward with this information?
Guilt.
February 1990, address 6974 Artesia Boulevard, Fritz's Gentlemen's Club. That's where the LAPD's Rampart division allegedly cooked up something wild, right in the middle of a Thursday night hangout. Every Thursday, records say, a man named Mark Highland would link up with them there. Now, this guy, he got arrested in the early 2000s for pretending to be a lawyer, but according to him, he was just a bookkeeper for the crew. While talking to documentary filmmaker Nick Broomfield, and supposedly under some partial federal immunity, Highland dropped bombshells about what those cops were really talking about at Fritz's. He claimed they were scheming to take out the Notorious B.I.G, yep, Biggie Smalls himself, the names he threw out, Raphael Perez, Nino Durden, and David Mack, all LAPD officers. And he said he heard them talk about planting fake evidence to frame Biggie first. Raphael Perez and his partner Nino Durden had already built a dirty reputation. In a separate case, they cornered a known gang member named Orando, also known as Orando O, inside an abandoned building, then opened fire on him. After that, they faked evidence, lied in court, and got him locked up for something he didn't do. It was all straight up perjury. Eventually, the truth unraveled. Their corruption got exposed and Orando O was released. The damage was deep. He'd been left in a wheelchair because of what they did, but the city had to pay up $15 million, the biggest LAPD settlement ever.
In February of '96, several LAPD officers, including Raphael Perez, Nino Durden, and David Mack, were at Fritz's in Bellflower, which is a gentleman's club. One of the individuals, I do not recall who, said, why don't we just get him from evidence like you normally?
That case even helped inspire Snoop Dogg's role in Training Day and Denzel Washington's character, loosely based on Raphael Perez, but Highland wasn't done. He claimed that while they were sipping drinks at Fritz's, the cops started talking seriously about putting a hit on Biggie. It started with talks about framing him and turned into whispers of murder. Highland even claimed he helped manage the finances for this so-called hit while pretending to be their bookkeeper. Later, Biggie's estate hit back with a civil lawsuit, armed with evidence suggesting the LAPD was involved. Senior lead detective Ken claimed that he once responded to a call at Can-Am Recording Studio, a spot Death Row Records used a lot, and spotted David Mack and Raphael Perez dressed in plain clothes, working as security. Here's where things get even messier. The Rampart division had ties to Death Row Records through an officer named Kevin Gaines. Back in 1994, Suge Knight's ex-wife, Sheritha Knight, started hooking up with Gaines, who reportedly began recruiting other off-duty cops to act as security. According to Highland, those early talks at Fritz's to take out Biggie may have started as far back as February 1996. That was right in the middle of the East Coast versus West Coast beef. At the time, Death Row was already under heat, especially after a police confession tape came out during Tupac's case. The tape claimed Bad Boy boss Puff Daddy had tossed around the idea of hitting both Tupac and Suge Knight in late 1995. Suge Knight. He believed the cops were deeply involved in both murders, Tupac and Biggie. Highland even claimed that Suge himself was at Fritz's when that deadly conversation about Biggie went down. And get this, all the cops Highland said were part of those shady discussions at Fritz's. They later got tied to the infamous Rampart corruption scandal, the same one that Raphael Perez would eventually blow the lid off. Raphael Perez got busted in 1998 for something wild, stealing straight from the LAPD's own evidence locker. But before all that, his story started far from LA. Perez was born in Puerto Rico, but moved to the East Coast as a kid. Right before high school, he landed in North Philly to live with his uncle. In an interview, Perez said it didn't take long to realize something was off. People kept pulling up to his uncle's place at all hours. That's when he figured out his uncle was tied into some underworld business. Living in that environment messed with his head. He called it uncomfortable and said that's what pushed him to become a cop. He was obsessed with the TV show Adam 12, not just because it was about cops, but because the show actually featured the building where he'd later end up working, LAPD's Rampart division.
In a nutshell, there was a hit taken out on Notorious B.I.G.
Just 3 days after he finished high school in 1985, he signed up for the Marines. Perez did boot camp, then got stationed at the Marine Barracks in Portsmouth, New Hampshire. At 18, he met a 21-year-old named Lori Charles. Things moved fast, they got married, but it didn't last. Lori later told interviewers Perez was some kind of money wizard. He could balance finances 4 months apart, down to the penny. But after her base closed and Perez transferred to the Marine Corps Air Station in Tustin, Orange County, things crumbled. He got caught cheating. The marriage ended. By 1989, Perez had traded in his Marine uniform for a badge, joining the LAPD. First, he was a probationer in the Harbor Division, then moved over to patrol in the Wilshire Division. That's when things took a serious turn. In 1991, a girl named Sonia Flores told the FBI that she met Perez at the Pan American nightclub, just down the street from the LAPD metro station. He was 24, on patrol, supposedly checking for underage drinkers. Sonia? She was just 14. She told the FBI they started dating. Let that sink in. According to her, Perez had a spot on Marathon Street that he shared with other officers, David Mack and Sammy Martin. Mack was a Compton native who grew up in the same area as Sujay Knight, and he wasn't just any kid from the block. He was a track star in high school, trained by none other than Tupac's manager, Layla Steinberg. She even talked about it in the 2021 doc Last Man Standing. Mack went to the University of Oregon, but later transferred to UCLA, where he met a man named Harry Ops, who would later change his name to Amir Ahmed after converting to Islam. Mack joined LAPD in 1988 after wrapping up his racing career, and soon he was rolling deep with Perez. These guys weren't your regular beat cops. After shifts ended, sometimes as late as 1 a.m., Perez would drive 50 miles from Foothill Division all the way to Anaheim just to knock back beers with his crew at some late-night bar. His old boss told the LA Times that this was a regular thing. The crew? Raphael Perez, his partner Nino Durden, David Mack, Kevin Gaines, and Sammy Martin. Out of them, Mack, Martin, and Perez were said to be the tightest. Sammy Martin wasn't just another cop. He was training to be a detective in Rampart and was also the godfather to Mack's kids. Meanwhile, Mack was godfather to Amir Ahmed's children. Perez himself had become an anti-gang detective in Rampart. At one point, he and Mack worked undercover together. Eventually, Perez got teamed up with a new partner, Nino Durden. Kevin Gaines, he was part of the CRASH unit, short for Community Resources Against Street Hoodlums. This wasn't just some random group of officers. These guys were plugged in, rolling together, partying together, and later getting caught up in one of the biggest police scandals LA has ever seen. Raphael Perez officially joined the CRASH unit in 1995, and that's when things got real dark. Members of the crew, including Perez, all had matching tattoos of the unit's logo, a skull with playing cards behind it. Not just any cards either, the dead man's hand. But that ink wasn't just for style. It was a twisted ranking system. Perez told investigators that the unit gave out actual playing cards like trophies. Red cards meant you wounded someone on duty. Black cards.
I transported monies interstate between Los Angeles and Phoenix to arrange the hit on Biggie Small.
That meant you killed someone. That's how they tracked their so-called wins. This sick system was exposed in the 2001 PBS Frontline documentary, and it shook the country. It all started unraveling in 1998 when Perez got caught stealing from the evidence locker. That's when Internal Affairs stepped in. But instead of going down alone, Perez flipped. He spilled everything about the Rampart Division's dirty secrets in exchange for a reduced sentence. His cooperation set off one of the biggest scandals in LAPD history.
And the sad thing about it, Orlando wasn't even the shooter, you know? It's fantastic, that's not at all. Perez and them was all involved. They were trying to kill me too. And the other thing is for Biggie, son, I'm quite sure if they saw the first one, they would saw the second one because it's the same circle of people, you know?
Over 70 officers were named in the mess, which caused more than 100 criminal convictions to get tossed out. These Rampart crash officers weren't just bending the rules, they were breaking them completely. Stealing evidence, lying in court, faking charges, they wrecked lives left and right. The fallout was massive. Los Angeles ended up paying over $125 million in settlements to people who were wrongly arrested or jailed. Perez, he got immunity for everything except murder, and he didn't hold back. He claimed 90% of the crash unit was in on it, knowingly framing people and lying under oath like it was just part of the job. He said the higher-ups knew what was going on and even encouraged it. Their mission was to lock up gang members by any means necessary, even if it meant cheating the whole system. And when it came time to celebrate, they all met up at a bar called The Short Stop near Dodger Stadium in Echo Park. That's where they drink, brag, and hand out those creepy playing card trophies after a shooting. But here's where it gets even crazier. Some of these same cops were living a double life. FBI files revealed that a number of crash unit officers weren't just targeting gangs, they were working with them too. Some were even blood gang affiliates or converted Muslims running with known street crews. Names like David Mack, Raphael Perez, and Kevin Gaines were all tied to blood gangs. In Frontline, it was reported that after David Mack got locked up for a 1997 bank robbery, he bragged to inmates that he was in the mob. During an interview with Detective Greg Grant, Mack admitted he was a Muslim and grew up in Compton, same neighborhood as Suge Knight. According to people who knew him, Mack had deep connections to the Compton mob Peru, specifically the East Side Mob, a notorious set based in Compton that blew up in the 90s thanks to ties with Death Row Records. When Suge Knight first launched Death Row in 1991, he brought on Compton mob Peru OG James McDonald as head of security. James then recruited backup from inside the gang. Suge also linked with other Peru sets, Campanella Park Peru through his enforcer Jay Robles and Treetop Peru through DJ Quick. This web ran deep. David Mack even popped up in a vacation photo with Sammy Martin and Raphael Perez, all of them rocking red suits, looking just like Suge Knight himself. In another photo, Mack and Perez were seen posing with the chief of police's daughter. Again, all decked out in red next to a cake that literally said, "Bloods rule." Perez, who spoke Spanish and was originally from Puerto Rico, wasn't just mixing with blood sets. He was also said to be connected with Latin gangs in LA too. This wasn't just police corruption. It was a full-blown underworld alliance. Some of the gangs tied to this tangled web.
I knew David very well because we worked together for years before he was an officer. He was one of the athletes on the team. I worked on David Mack in 82, 83, 84. The Olympics were in 1984.
The 18th Street Gang, the Mexican Mafia, and the Temple Street Crew, all serious players in the LA underworld. David Mack and Raphael Perez, while undercover for the LAPD's West Bureau buy team, were accused of robbing drug dealers while on duty. Yep, cops by day, jack boys by night. Detective Russell Poole started digging after hearing reports of these shady heists. But instead of punishment, Mack actually got awarded the Medal of Bravery, all thanks to Perez's testimony. The award came after Mack shot a man named Jose Vincencio 13 times, killing him. Witnesses swore it was an unprovoked hit, but Perez backed him up in court, claiming it was all self-defense. That wasn't the only story to come out. Sonia Flores told the FBI she had seen Perez and Mack pull off something even darker. According to her, in late 1994, Perez and Mack scooped her up in Sammy Martin's BMW. She noticed right away they were strapped up wearing body armor under their clothes. She claimed they drove to an apartment on Bellevue Avenue in LA, home of Juan Cardosa, a small-time player in the narco scene with ties to the Mexican Mafia. Street name? Chino. At the spot with him was an older Hispanic woman who Sonia believed to be his mother. Then it got cold-blooded. Sonia said she watched Perez walk up and put a bullet in Chino's head. Point blank. Mack didn't hesitate either. He allegedly did the same thing to the woman. Sonia said they wrapped the bodies up in garbage bags and duct tape, then took a trip south, dumping both in a ravine in Tijuana, Mexico. That ravine, it was known as a cartel dump zone during the height of the narco wars, and it didn't stop there. Sonia claimed Perez once showed her another body stuffed in a car trunk, a young Hispanic club dancer. According to her, Perez had killed her and dumped her the same way. The FBI got involved and worked with Mexican authorities to excavate the ravine, but they found no remains. After that, Sonia retracted her whole statement. The feds charged her for lying to the FBI. Some say she made it all up. Others think she told the truth. Maybe the bodies had already been moved, just like in Goodfellas when they had to move Billy Bats. By 1995, Mack and Perez both landed in the Rampart division, and Perez got teamed up with Nino Durden. And right away, they started doing dirty work. One of the biggest setups involved an 18th Street gang member with the street name Sniper, real name Orvando. Perez and Durden caught up with Sniper at an abandoned apartment complex. They shot him on sight, leaving him paralyzed. Then they planted a gun next to him to make it look like a shootout. The official report, the usual self-defense. They claimed they were running surveillance and that Sniper ambushed them with a pistol. But in court, it was all lies. They told the jury Sniper fired on them first, and that's why they had to shoot back 7 times. All made up.
David Mack, renouncing the LAPD and coming out as a blood gang member.
He's in custody, Los Angeles County Jail, and we're getting reports back that he is attiring himself with red socks, red items that distinguish association with the blood gang. And we'd also received word from jailers that he had said he is a blood.
And with that fake story, they got Sniper locked up for 23 years. This was just one of the many cases that proved the Rampart cops weren't protecting the streets. They were running the game. When the Rampart scandal finally cracked wide open, Raphael Perez came clean. He admitted to lying under oath and planting a gun to frame a gang member, Orvando, aka Sniper. After years behind bars, Orvando was finally freed and received a massive $15 million payout from the city. But that wasn't the only setup Perez had cooked up. He also falsely tied 4 members of the Temple Street gang to the murder of Miguel Lizard Malone, a known shot caller in the Mexican mafia. When Miguel was found shot dead in an apartment, Perez didn't solve the case. He built a fake one. He found a sketchy witness and pinned it on the Temple Street crew. Boom, case closed. Wrongfully, Perez started gaining a reputation for a grim pattern, robbing dealers, then framing them after the fact. Investigators even gave him a nickname, 211 Suit, the police code for robbery. And he wasn't alone in this crooked game. A number of Rampart cops were knee-deep in this underworld, and that trail led straight to Death Row Records. Here's where things get real messy. Suge Knight, the infamous boss behind Death Row Records, was married to Sharitha Knight from 1989 to 1996. When Suge launched Death Row in '91, he set up a side venture called Nightlife Management, a shell company that he put in Sharitha's name.
Running suits would be used by a number of people that would go in and do robberies, and hence the nickname 211 suit. 211 is the section of the California Penal Code which stands for robbery. So we see a picture of Raphael Perez in this 211 suit, making hand signs that depicted a specific blood group of gangs on the West Coast.
That company started managing big artists like Snoop Dogg and more. Then in 1994, Sharitha started seeing Kevin Gaines, an LAPD officer with deep Rampart ties. Gaines even moved in with her and was driving around in a green Montero registered in her name. It gets deeper. Former Rampart Captain Rich Mejia said Gaines had 7 different credit cards tied to Death Row Records, and this guy wasn't just spending, he was recruiting. Gaines was said to be bringing in officers from across departments to work off-duty security for Death Row artists. LAPD officer Kevin Lowe told Detective Greg Grant that Gaines even tried to recruit him to work for Suge Knight's girlfriend. Sharitha Knight was later questioned by Death Row's head of security, Reggie Wright Jr., about checks made out to Kevin Gaines. She admitted Gaines would round up his cop buddies to act as security for Snoop Dogg, and they were always paid in cash. If money had to be transferred electronically, she claimed, Gaines would break it into chunks under $10,000 to dodge mandatory IRS currency transaction reports. That's textbook money laundering, and the trail of dirty money didn't end there. Gaines had receipts showing he spent nearly $1,000 at Monty's Steakhouse, a fancy spot that just happened to be a Death Row Records hangout. In fact, Snoop Dogg's acquittal party was thrown there after he beat a murder charge connected to the death of 20-year-old Crip, Philip Paul DeMare. Here's the kicker. Key evidence in that case, including shell casings, was supposed to be locked up in the LAPD's Pacific Division evidence room. But guess who had access to that locker? Kevin Gaines. And somehow all that evidence vanished. Without it, Snoop was cleared of the charges. Classified FBI files would later directly link the missing evidence to both Kevin Gaines and Suge Knight. And it didn't stop with Gaines. Senior LAPD detective Kenneth Knox kept getting called out to Can-Am Studios in Tarzana, used by Death Row for recording sessions. Every time he showed up, guess who he saw? Raphael Perez and David Mack, working security, plain clothes like it was nothing. Even Snoop Dogg's cousin Joe Cowan came forward in the 2022 docuseries Who Killed Biggie and Tupac, saying he saw both Mack and Perez multiple times at Death Row's offices. And back in the early days, Suge Knight had already locked in his muscle. Compton Mubby Piru gang members were running security for him. This whole setup, it wasn't just entertainment and music. It was a dangerous fusion of cops, gangs, and power. Jimmy Iovine from Interscope, Suge Knight's distribution partner, dropped a bomb in a 2017 interview with Sway. He said he once told Suge to hire off-duty cops for security, only to find out the ones Suge brought in were Rampart Division cops.
Attorney Johnny Cochran has said evidence in this trial is, quote, going to be a problem again. Part of that problem is the fact that the LAPD accidentally destroyed evidence against Snoop Doggy Dogg and the others.
Yeah, the same corrupt crew caught in one of the biggest scandals in LAPD history. Between 1993 and 1994, Suge Knight gave $300,000 to Reggie Wright Jr. to help launch Right Way Protective Services, a so-called security company that would provide police protection for Death Row Records. Reggie Jr. was no stranger to the streets. He used to be a Compton cop. His dad, Reggie Wright Sr., was actually the head of Compton PD's gang division, another player in this tangled mess. Kevin Hackey, a former cop with the Unified School District PD, he got approached by federal agents, FBI, ATF, the works, to go undercover at Death Row Records. They had him pose as a bodyguard under Rightway's label to spy from the inside. Hackey later spoke out in the book Labyrinth by Randall Sullivan. He claimed that Reggie Wright Jr. and his partner, Smokey Burrell, were infamous for ripping off drug dealers. Hackey believed that's how Reggie got tight with Suge Knight. He said, quote,
I spent $5 million. I got Johnny Cochran to represent one of his homeboys. I got David Kenner to represent him and to investigate.
That's how Reggie and Suge became involved. Reggie Jr. told people he got the job at Death Row through his father. Turns out there was chatter that the Mob Piru gang, Death Row's own muscle, was planning to hold Suge Knight for ransom. Mob James, one of the OGs, confirmed that there was a plot. After that, Suge made a move. He gave Reggie Jr. the role of head of security, demoting Mob James and bringing in uniformed cops to replace the street enforcers. By that point, Rightway Protective Services was stacked with around 25 off-duty officers working full-time security for Death Row Records. Reggie Jr. even got involved in Snoop Dogg's murder trial, supposedly helping line up expert witnesses for the defense in case things went sideways. But it all started to fall apart. Compton Sergeant Fred Reynolds later claimed in his book Black, White, and Gray All Over that the chief of police revoked Rightway's permits during Snoop's trial. Turns out the company was using cops to hand out subpoenas and work shady deals. Then there's Dwayne Keith D. Davis, who's currently facing trial in connection to Tupac's murder.
I saw Officer Perez and Officer Mack at Death Row Records several times. You making $50,000 a year, $45,000 a year, and Suge Knight throwing you a little extra, like double that? Man, you gonna be right, hell yeah, I'll work for you.
In an interview with filmmaker R.J. Bond, Keith D said he believed Compton PD officers were straight up acting as hitmen for Suge Knight. While in prison in 1998, Keith said David Mack approached him, leaving him shook and wondering if he was on a death row hit list. Back in Labyrinth, several unsolved homicides were linked to cops working under Death Row's umbrella. One case involved Philip Woldemariam. Snoop Dogg's bodyguard shot him, but the evidence mysteriously disappeared. Another victim, Kelly Jamin, was reportedly killed by Mob Peru members and DJ Quick at a Death Row event, with off-duty cops covering the whole thing up. There's more. Bruce Richardson, who once attacked Suge Knight in a nightclub, was found dead in his own home, notably behind a reinforced door.
I insisted that they get real security. I insisted they get real police. So next time I go, there's real police. I found out they were Rampart guys.
LAPD Detective Russell Poole believed the killer might have been let in because Bruce thought it was a cop. Then there's Vince Buchanan. He was found dumped in a Compton graveyard, handcuffed, tortured, and murdered. Video footage later surfaced showing him in custody, killed by people dressed in police uniforms. Many believe it was revenge for him allegedly shooting Suge Knight's Peru enforcer Poochie. And in the middle of all this chaos, Mark Highland, the man featured in the 2002 doc Biggie and Tupac. There's barely anything about him online, but when that doc was filmed in 2001, Highland was fresh behind bars. He'd been busted on 37 counts of impersonating a lawyer, but while locked up in LA's Men's Central Jail, he cut a deal for federal immunity and spilled everything to filmmaker Nick Broomfield. He claimed he worked as a bookkeeper for the cops, keeping track of money, deals, and shady transactions. Think of it like Breaking Bad. Remember Skylar White covering for Ted Beneke? That's what Highland said he did for the Rampart cops. Only this wasn't about cooking books for taxes. This was about murders, frame-ups, and dirty cash. Just like that scene in the TV show, bookkeepers don't always play it straight. In real life, crooked bookkeepers can help organizations hide dirty money, keeping it off the books so it slips right past the IRS. And we already saw Kevin Gaines doing something just like that with Death Row Records, ducking the required currency transaction reports to keep the cash invisible.
One of the individuals, I do not recall who, said, why don't we just get them from evidence like you normally do? And they all kind of laughed and chuckled and everything. At that point, my jaw about dropped, realizing that, yeah, there's a lot of booze going around here and a lot of drugs going around, but these guys seem very serious.
Mark Highland claimed he was caught up in something similar. He said he handled money moves for the Rampart cops, money that was allegedly tied to illegal business. According to him, it all started at Fritz's Gentlemen's Club in Bellflower, California, back in February 1996.
Thursday nights, they all went to some strip joint, you know, and I used to see stacks of one.
That's when he overheard a chilling conversation. He said the cops were talking about Biggie Smalls, and it wasn't just regular gossip. This was serious. According to Highland, Biggie was seen as a threat because of where he stood. He wasn't just a rival artist, he was affiliated with the Southside Compton Crips. And the cops, they were deeply connected to the mob peers, the sworn enemies of the Crips. Highland claimed the first phase of the plan was to frame Biggie. Just like they had done with others before. If they went that route, it would have probably had to go down on the West Coast, unless they had East Coast officers in on it too.
Faith was at the studio, our studio, and they hit him up. Track was playing. Was the one that hit him up? I think it was Faith that went and told him that Pac was doing that track and he was putting some lyrics to it. So before we can finish that track, they beat us to it and put out Get Money.
Highland even compared it to how the Italian mafia used corrupt cops as enforcers, something that's long been whispered about in New York. In fact, the FBI's classified files on the Biggie case mention ties between Death Row and East Coast mob families, specifically the Genovese and Colombo crews. Death Row's lawyer, David Kenner, was allegedly the bridge. At the same time, NYPD had Biggie under investigation for possible arms trafficking, and he was reportedly being followed by case detectives in LA. That surveillance? It might have caught the Rampart cops stalking Biggie, according to the files. Mark Highland named names. Raphael Perez, David Mack, and Nino Durden were allegedly all part of that group at Fritz's. And not just that, Highland also claimed Suge Knight himself was there when the topic turned to murder. Highland said the talk turned from framing Biggie to killing him. The conversation shifted into the logistics, how to get weapons and how to fund the hit. Highland claimed there was a Death Row Records party happening at Fritz's that same February night in '96, and that Rampart cops were working off-duty security. That checks out. Death Row's former publicist George Price confirmed in BET's Death Row Chronicles that Suge used to throw events every Thursday at various gentlemen's clubs across LA. That would place the alleged murder planning session in early February 1996, over a year before Biggie was actually killed in March 1997.
Chronicles.
The dog pound is Snoop called and they tell us. They shout us our trailers up trying to shoot us, trying to kill us. I got them on speaker. Mike right there.
Highland said, as their bookkeeper, he was tasked with moving money. He claimed he transported cash between Los Angeles and Phoenix, money that acted as a deposit for the hit on Biggie. Then came an even wilder twist. Raphael Perez's former prison cellmate, Kenneth Boagni, dropped more info in the 2022 miniseries Who Killed Biggie and Tupac. He said Perez told him everything but that he got threatened behind bars. According to Boagni, the LAPD warned him he'd get shanked in prison if he testified, but Boagni still spoke up. He claimed Perez told him that Rampart cops were paid up front, $250,000 from people connected to Death Row to begin planning Biggie's murder. But the full deal was even heavier. Boagni said there was a promise of another $750,000, but under one condition. Both Biggie and Puff Daddy had to be taken out. Highland later admitted he wished he was making all this up because he was terrified someone might come after him for what he knew, but he stood by his claims. That in February 1996, he heard LAPD officers openly talk about setting up a hit on Biggie.
It's to help orchestrate the hit.
Anthony Pelicano, you know, that Perez and Mac use, that Suge and them use on a regular basis. He got all this information from them guys, how to find people and stuff like that, and they used them. Mrs. Wallace had the right to know that the LAPD played a part in killing her son.
Now let's put that timeline into perspective. At the time, Biggie was caught right in the middle of the East Coast versus West Coast war. In February 1996, he dropped Get Money with Junior MAFIA, a track that used an instrumental jacked from Death Row. And back in October 1995, his wife, Faith Evans, had linked up with Tupac in LA, reportedly recording music together. To some,
the night of the actual murder, David Mack told him to keep his eye on Notorious B.I.G. and Sean Puffy Combs. And when they got up or they made any type of move, he was to alert David Mack.
That was disrespect. To others, that was motive. And if Highland's story is even halfway true, the plans to take out Biggie might have been brewing long before his final days. During a studio session with Death Row Records, Faith Evans was flown out from New York, right after Tupac was bailed out of prison by Death Row's lawyer, David Kenner. Tupac's case had been an East Coast matter, and just before his sentencing, he was shot inside a Manhattan studio, while Biggie and Puff Daddy were reportedly recording upstairs. That left Tupac with zero trust for Big or anyone tied to Bad Boy Records after that night. When Faith linked with Tupac in LA, he played her a new track he was working on. It had a sample from Denise Edwards' 1984 song. But here's the scandal. When Faith got back to New York, she told Biggie about the beat, and he turned around and used it for Junior MAFIA's hit, Get Money. That's right. They jacked Tupac's instrumental, which was supposed to drop through Death Row. Suge Knight wasn't quiet about it either. He spoke on the situation in an interview with BET, livid about the beat theft. Get Money officially dropped on February 3rd, 1996, just 5 days before one of Suge Knight's infamous Thursday Club nights. That lines up with when Mark Highland claimed he overheard Rampart cops at Fritz's discussing a possible hit on Biggie. But that wasn't all. Just a month earlier, on December 16th, 1995, things got real violent. While Snoop Dogg and Dogg Pound were filming a video in New York, Biggie went on Hot 97 with Funk Flex and exposed the location of the shoot live on air. Not long after their trailer got shot up, Suge Knight spoke about the incident later in Death Row Chronicles, claiming it was all Biggie's doing. Then came the Soul Train Music Awards at the Shrine Auditorium in LA, happening just weeks after Get Money dropped. Biggie, Puffy, Tupac, and Suge Knight were all in the building. Suge never wanted to back down, allegedly assembled 50 mob Piru soldiers all dressed in P-Funk shirts, a coded show of Piru gang loyalty. Word was, Suge planned to have them drag Biggie off the stage. But Reggie Wright Jr., head of Death Row Security, caught wind of the plan.
The party was closed down. When Notorious B.I.G. and Sean Combs got up to leave, Perez called Mac and told Mac they were going to their cars. He said he received a call from Mac about 5 minutes later, telling him to get out of the way. And he said that's when all hell broke.
He stepped in and shut it down, saying it would have created a full-blown riot. Now here's where it gets even deeper. Dwayne Keefe D. Davis, a Southside Compton Crip and known Bad Boy affiliate, was working security that night at the Shrine. Reggie Jr. pulled him aside and warned him about the Peru ambush. Keefe D. and his crew reportedly blocked the Peru members from getting inside. Still, tension exploded between Death Row and Bad Boy that night. Biggie's boy, Gouda, allegedly pulled a gun on Suge and Tupac during the confrontation. After all that, Suge doubled down on his East Coast takeover, launching Death Row East. He even started signing former Bad Boy artists like Craig Mack to flip the script. Then Tupac dropped the explosive diss track Hit 'Em Up in June 1996, rapping that he slept with Faith Evans and calling out Biggie by name. The beat? It was based on the same original instrumental Faith had told Big about months earlier. Meanwhile, word on the street said Biggie and Puff were looking for muscle of their own. They were rumored to have started working with the Southside Compton Crips, known rivals of Suge's mob Peru circle. According to Compton PD chatter, Puffy was accused of putting a bounty on Suge Knight, offering up cash to Southside Crips to try and take down Death Row. The beef was no longer just music. It was deeply gang-connected, full of revenge, setups, and street politics that ended in tragedy for everyone involved. In July 1996, things kicked off hard. Suge Knight's crew, Compton mob pirates like Trayvon Lane and K-Dog, were spotted at Lakewood Mall when Orlando Anderson, a Southside Compton Crip, tried to snatch a Death Row Records chain off Trayvon's neck.
Which officers are you saying were implicated in the murder of Biggie Smalls?
David Mack, Sammy Martin, Dirty. You had one other officer that was involved in it, and I keep forgetting his name. He was Kevin Gay. So it's 5 officers that was involved in a planning that was prepared to execute.
That single moment would set off a chain reaction that many believe was tied to a rumored bounty put out by Puffy himself, allegedly paying for any Death Row chains taken as trophies. Fast forward to September 1996, Las Vegas. Suge Knight, Tupac, and their mob Peru entourage rolled into town to catch the Mike Tyson fight. After the event, Trayvon Lane spotted Orlando Anderson in the MGM Grand Lobby and pointed him out to Tupac and Suge, saying, "That's the Crip who tried to jack me. He's tied to Biggie and Puffy." That's all Tupac needed to hear. Security footage shows Tupac, Suge, and the pirates jumping Orlando Anderson right there in the MGM. Hours later on the Vegas Strip, a drive-by shooter unloaded 13 shots into the car, carrying Suge and Tupac. News spread fast and fingers pointed straight at the Southside Compton Crips, rumored to be in cahoots with Bad Boy. Tupac didn't survive. Within a week, he was gone. Soon after, whispers turned into claims that Biggie had put up $1 million for the hit. Suge Knight has consistently denied that the Southside Crips were behind it. He's long said it was dirty cops, including Raphael Perez, using the Crips as scapegoats to take the heat off themselves. 6 months later, in early 1997, Biggie went to Los Angeles on a press run for his upcoming album, Life After Death. That trip turned out to be his last. Kenneth Boagni, Raphael Perez's former cellmate, told journalist Don Sikorsky in the Dossier podcast that Perez had spilled serious details behind bars. He claimed LAPD officers were tailing Biggie in LA and even hired Anthony Pelicano, a Hollywood private investigator known as a fixer, to illegally wiretap Biggie's phone in order to track him. Pelicano wasn't just some PI. He was later convicted for running illegal surveillance ops all across Hollywood, tapping calls for celebrities and execs alike. Now here's the setup. March 8th, 1997. Quincy Jones's daughter, Kidada Jones, co-hosted a party for Vibe magazine and Quest Records at the Peterson Automotive Museum in LA. It was a star-studded event. Kidada had recently lost Tupac and invited over 1,000 guests, including many East Coast artists and the Bad Boy crew. Biggie had reportedly been seen earlier that day hanging around South Park in Compton, a neighborhood deep in Southside Compton Crip territory. According to the Bad Boy book by Ronan Rowe and confirmed in a Vlad TV interview with ex-Compton cops, Biggie was also seen at a local basketball tournament with the Crips. There's even graffiti showing Biggie's name tagged over a West Side Piru wall in a public restroom nearby. Despite all this, Biggie wasn't even supposed to be at that Vibe party. Kidada gave invites to Bad Boy, but Biggie's name wasn't on the list. He had a scheduled trip to London from March 9th to 11th, booked by Bad Boy's distributor Arista Records, but at the last minute, everything changed. According to Kirk Burroughs, former president of Bad Boy, Puffy called Arista and canceled Biggie's London trip, insisting that Big had to be at the party. Later, DJ Clark Kent revealed he stopped by Biggie's hotel room that night, and Biggie told him, "Puff and D-Rock set it up, I'm going to the party instead." That decision would be fatal. Declassified FBI files show witnesses claim that Rampart cops, some of the same officers tied to the Perez scandal, were spotted at the Vibe party talking on their cell phones just before the Biggie hit went down. And Kenneth Boagni? In the 2022 docuseries Who Killed Biggie and Tupac, he doubled down on the claim, saying everything pointed back to the cops, not just gangs. So was Biggie gunned down in a crossfire of gang retaliation? Or was it something deeper? A hit orchestrated by rogue cops hiding behind street beefs. The truth, still clouded in shadows. But every detail brings us closer to the edge of something huge. Kenneth Boagni, Raphael Perez's former cellmate, claimed Perez confessed his role in Biggie's murder was to stalk him throughout the Vibe party and relay his exact location via cell phone to David Mack. According to Boagni, this wasn't random. This was a setup. Southside Compton Crip Dwayne Keith D. Davis was also at that party. He later confirmed in an interview with filmmaker R.J. Bond that he saw both Raphael Perez and other Rampart cops there that night. Tupac's former manager and David Mack's old track coach Layla Steinberg also attended. In the 2021 documentary Last Man Standing, she confirmed David Mack and other officers were present at the venue. Boagni alleged that Perez was calling David Mack during the event, passing updates about Biggie's movement. Mack, in turn, was supposedly feeding that info to Amir Muhammad, who was allegedly hired as the trigger man. Then came the moment of chaos. The fire department shut the party down for overcrowding. According to Boagni, Perez tipped off Mack that Biggie was about to leave through a specific exit. At the same time, a gunshot went off on the opposite side of the building, drawing security and police in the wrong direction. As Biggie and Puffy's crew waited for their vehicles out front, Puffy's longtime bodyguard, Gene Deal, noticed a man approaching them in a Nation of Islam uniform. That man, he said, was Amir Muhammad. When Gene flashed his weapon, Amir turned around and casually walked back toward the suspect vehicle. Boagni later told this story to both Nick Broomfield and the Dossier podcast team. He said 5 Rampart officers believed to be part of Perez's inner circle were involved in coordinating the hit.
Gaines was supposed to cut both of them off, the officer Gaines. A lot of people don't know that the Gaines was seriously involved in this. He was supposed to cut both vehicles off, and the other guy come around and shoot him.
He also alleged Perez told him that Kevin Gaines had a specific role, to cut off Puffy's security, who were following in a separate vehicle, making it easier to take out both targets. The plan? Multiple shooters, 2 targets, Biggie and Puffy. But Gene Deal's quick thinking may have changed everything. He said that all night he had been hearing whispers of a possible hit. So when their car pulled up, he ordered the driver to run the red light. And that sudden move disrupted the timing. a white Toyota Land Cruiser was reported as missing its interception point just before the hit. Boagny said that truck was being driven by Kevin Gaines. Meanwhile, a black Chevy Impala SS, allegedly carrying Amir Muhammad, was ready to follow up. According to the story, Amir got the green light and proceeded to take out Biggie. Speculation has it that Gaines was originally meant to kill Biggie, and Amir Muhammad was assigned to take out Puffy. But Gene Deal's decision might have thrown the whole hit off course, saving Puffy's life. Then came the aftermath. FBI agent Phil Carson later revealed in the 2022 series Who Killed Biggie and Tupac that LAPD logs showed Raphael Perez was officially on the scene as a responding officer, even though his presence made zero sense. Carson said Perez was caught tampering with shell casings, raising serious red flags. It didn't stop there. According to the book Chaos Merchants, written by LAPD Detective Russell Poole and Michael Douglas Carlin, Perez even used his police credentials to enter the morgue after the hit, allegedly to confirm Biggie was dead. They claimed he was making sure the job had been completed. Shocking still, photos of Biggie's body in the morgue eventually leaked and appeared in the 2001 PBS Frontline series that exposed the Rampart connection. The bullets used in the hit were no regular rounds. They were Gecko 9mm armor piercing, a type typically sold only to law enforcement and military through surplus vendors. That detail alone added a whole new level of suspicion.
You know who Suge Knight is, right?
Yes, I do.
And how do you know who Suge Knight is?
Through our association with him.
And how did you meet Mr. Muhammad?
In L.A. and Las Vegas.
And was Mr. Muhammad with David Mack at that time?
Yes.
And is that how you know who Mr. Muhammad is?
That's the only way I know. That is the only way I know.
Then came Clayton Hill, an inmate and Nation of Islam member. In 2011, he stepped forward claiming he had direct knowledge about the murder weapon used in Biggie's assassination. Hill said he became involved in the case because of his Nation of Islam connections and knew where the gun had ended up after the shooting. If even half of these claims hold weight, it paints a terrifying picture. Rogue cops, gang ties, and secret networks hiding in plain sight, orchestrating one of hip-hop's most devastating murders. Clayton Hill dropped serious heat in 2011 when he claimed he helped Amir Muhammad ditch the murder weapon used in Biggie's killing. Hill said the gun was a 9mm blue steel pistol loaded with Gecko armor-piercing rounds. He claimed that 2 months after the hit, he was instructed by Minister Tony Muhammad, the Nation of Islam's Western regional leader, to pick someone up from the Greyhound station in Atlanta. That person, a man going by the name W. Muhammad, who Hill later identified as Amir Muhammad, also known as Amir Hamed. According to Hill, Amir had just come from LA and was on the run, staying in a safe house for 6 weeks to lay low. Hill claimed Amir retrieved the gun from a trash bag, told him he was tied to the Pyrrhus in Los Angeles, and then passed the weapon on. Hill said the next stop for the gun was Emil Muhammad, the personal driver for Minister Louis Farrakhan. The weapon was allegedly handed off to a high-ranking Nation of Islam official at their Chicago headquarters. Amir Muhammad resurfaced on October 21, 1998, when he was arrested after threatening his ex-girlfriend, Angelique Michelle, and her new partner. When cops rolled up, Amir gave a fake ID under the name Harry Muhammad. He got cited and released, but within 48 hours, both his ex and her partner were found dead, and the deaths were ruled self-inflicted. To make things even sketchier, someone inside the LAPD allegedly wiped Amir Muhammad's record clean. Informants told the FBI that Amir had been seen around Suge Knight and David Mack at Death Row headquarters. His name kept popping up in all the wrong places. Meanwhile, back in LA, cops got closer to something big. The same type of Gecko 9mm ammo used to kill Biggie. It was later found in David Mack's home. But that's not all. David Mack had pulled off a Bank of America heist 8 months after Biggie's murder. The inside help? His 19-year-old girlfriend who worked at the bank while he was still married. She doubled the standard cash order totaling $722,000 and helped him get into the vault. Mack was caught on surveillance footage, calmly walking out with the cash stuffed in the same duffel bag it was delivered in. The very next day, Mack went to Las Vegas with Raphael Perez and other officers. According to Kenneth Boani, Perez confessed that the real reason for the bank robbery was to get the rest of the money owed to Amir Muhammad. Since only one hit had been completed, Biggie's, the full $1 million payoff wasn't delivered. So Mack allegedly robbed the bank to make up the rest and paid Amir in Vegas the next day. When cops raided David Mack's home over the robbery, what they found was straight out of a movie. Inside his garage sat a black Chevy Impala SS, matching the description of the getaway car used in Biggie's murder. Beneath the floorboards, they uncovered what investigators described as a shrine to Tupac. Even more damning, They found multiple 9mm blue steel pistols, the same kind used in Biggie's hit, and a stash of gecko armor-piercing rounds, just like the ones found in Biggie's body.
It states in this document, quote, in January 2001, the LAPD instituted a formal internal affairs investigation. The LAPD itself alleged that Mack and Perez conspired to murder and assisted in the murder of Mr. Wall.
Despite this pile of evidence, LAPD blocked Detective Russell Poole, who was investigating Mack, from going deeper. His superiors refused to let him pull Mack's financial records, and they shut down his efforts to run forensics on the Impala. Poole was convinced he was on the edge of exposing a massive cover-up, but the department wouldn't let him follow the trail. And just like that, the people who were supposed to be solving the case might have been the ones burying it. During his deposition, David Mack was directly asked if he had financial connections to Death Row Records lawyer, David Kenner. Mack refused to answer, but the silence said a lot. In the 2022 docuseries, Who Killed Biggie and Tupac, former FBI agent Phil Carson revealed an internal LAPD document that flat out stated Mack and Perez were suspected of conspiring in the murder of Biggie. The bombshell. LAPD's internal affairs knew, but their hands were tied. The document revealed that the LAPD had been illegally adjudicated. They weren't even allowed to arrest the officers involved due to restrictions under a federal consent decree. Raphael Perez's immunity agreement tied to him exposing the Rampart scandal meant charges couldn't be pursued without violating federal law. So what did LAPD do? They allegedly covered it up. In 2002, Biggie's family filed a $500 million lawsuit against the city of Los Angeles and LAPD, backed by the findings of Detective Russell Poole. That same year, the federal government launched a task force called Wrap It Up, meant to reinvestigate Biggie's murder. But here's the shady part. They focused on removing any mention of police involvement. The task force was led by former LAPD Chief Bratton, but he got booted from the investigation after being caught in a separate case involving dishonesty. While still active, the task force went after one of Suge Knight's ex-girlfriends. She was accused of fraud, and they allegedly used that as leverage, threatening to take her kids away unless she cooperated. They claimed she was tied financially to a mob Piru member known as Poochie, someone Suge Knight was allegedly close to. The task force typed up a fake confession letter as if it had come from the deceased gang member and pressured Suga's ex into agreeing with it. She eventually gave in and confirmed the narrative, even though it was fabricated. They said the murder was paid for in multiple $5,000 transfers totaling $20,000, structured in a way to avoid detection. That became their new smoking gun for pinning the hit on someone other than the LAPD. But a judge later ruled there was not enough real evidence to pursue legal charges. Still, the move worked. The LAPD's involvement was officially cleared, and the $500 million lawsuit was dropped in 2010. In this video, we broke down the explosive claims made in the prison interview with Mark Highland. He said he helped move part of the alleged $250,000 deposit that funded the hit on Biggie. According to him, he was acting as a bookkeeper for corrupt officers tied to the Rampart scandal. But outside of that 2002 documentary, no other info exists about Highland. He vanished from the public record. So now the question's on you. Do you believe what Mark Highland claimed? Was he telling the truth about moving money tied to one of the most infamous murders in hip-hop history? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I want to hear what you think. If you made it this far, smash that like button. Don't forget to subscribe and tap the bell icon so you're first to know when I drop another deep dive. Thanks again for watching, and I'll catch you on the next one. Peace.